Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here with Onar. We're going to have a sort of a semi-brief chat today, about an hour, about applications of DIM or clarifications of DIM, places where we want to be able to identify what the three positions on DIM would be, and there isn't really a go-to set of words or concepts for us to do that with. Like with... we know the M and the I of individualism. The M is collectivism, the I is individualism, but what is the D of really individualism or something like that? Overt and too much individualism. And you propose like atomism.
Atomism, which is disintegrated individualism.
Because individuals aren't actually metaphysically in a vacuum.
That's right. They're
actually,
always contextual.
There's some connection between individuals and the world, actually, in reality.
But what we mean by individualism is still that the individual is the primary metaphysical component, starting point of any kind of analysis or understanding of reality. So, in other words, when you're trying to understand human behavior, human values, you don't slice up a human into its smaller components. The smallest component is the individual. So you're not trying to understand human life by completely disintegrating it into its constituent organic parts. But in the same vein, you don't understand human behavior by isolating the individual from the world that it lives in. So solipsism or something like that would be like living in a bubble all by yourself, and then that wouldn't be proper individualism, because individualism is actually social. We have language in order to communicate with other people. That's an important part of individualism, being able to speak. So it's not like other people don't play a role in individualism. But so we need those three words, and the problem I can say there that I'm going to give Kant a tiny bone. He says that Kant says that we actually project our concepts onto the world. So we're not observing the world, but we're creating the world through our projection of forms. And that's, of course, false, but there's a sliver of truth to that in the terms of when we create language. Let me give a famous example of that, the color blue. Like if you look in ancient Greek texts or in any kind of ancient language, there's just no word for blue. So the ancient Greek talked about the ocean, I think it was kind of green, and the heavens were wine colored. Like, what's up with that?
Yeah, that's weird, because they aren't really wine colored.
Except that if you don't have a concept for blue and you just lump it together in with something that's close to it. And they've done studies of various groups that lack the color today, like primitive peoples who lack the concept of blue. And they actually have big problems.
Now,
like if you point out.
Now, is that because there's no place we see blue, like, for example, the sky, and very, very small number of people's eyeballs, but not very many other places?
We don't know the reason for it, but one reason could be that we don't have things that we work with in real life that is blue. Like, the sky is blue, but it's only passive, so we don't care about, we don't need to create tool-like.
Well, if that's the main place you see blue, then you're going to have a different concept for it, like the color of the sky or something. You're not going to, if that's pretty much the only place you see blue. Now, it occurs to me there's blue jays, there's beetles that are blue, but there's not a lot. Like, green is everywhere. We're going to have the color green for sure. Red is everywhere. It's dangerous. Tomatoes are dangerous. They'll kill you. Red is dangerous, right? So red's everywhere.
Yeah.
Blue's not so much. But I want to offer another second example, if you will, from my talks with Gio, the French objectivist. he tells me that there's no word in French for to earn. There is to deserve, but not to earn. And so that, you just look at the French culture and you can see that there are definitely ramifications of not having the concept of earning something, only deserving.
That's right, and that's so. The point is that if you lack a word, you're actually going to be mentally handicapped. So they tried this with a tribe where they didn't have a concept of blue, and they showed lots of shades of green and a picture and a blue in there, and they were not able to pick out the one blue color. Like which one is something standing out here? No, nothing was standing out. But they were able to distinguish like tiny variations of green because they were living in a green jungle, right? So they had this amazing ability to distinguish between things that we in the West can't see the difference between. So it's not like the blue they don't see the blue, that they're like blind to it. That it doesn't have significance to them. It doesn't stand out.
This reminds me of the Eskimos, who have dozens of words for snow and ice.
Yeah.
And I can say to my daughter, be careful on the snow, some of it will cut you. And she said, what? Snow's supposed to be fluffy, but if it gets hard and crusty on top, it can be dangerous. And the Eskimos have different words for that, and we don't. We just have crusty snow or snow.
Yes. And in Norway, there are certain words that or sounds that have been lost, like during the Dark Ages, during the Black Plague. Then we used to have the th sound, like saying thing. But because of the Black Plague, that word was lost, so they started saying ting instead, like just a T word.
I don't get the cause and effect there. How did that affect that?
Like when all the adults die, and you only have imperfect children to learn from. So basically you got a kind of kids language version of the language. So a lot of the adult words like th sound, thing, was lost. So they couldn't say th, so they said ting instead.
Interesting.
And in modern day, we have now, just right now, the same is happening with a kind of it's not quite the same, but like you would say sheep versus cheap. Those are not the same word. But in Norway, we have we don't say the ch sound, we say sheep. But in Norway, before, like 30 years ago, everyone could hear the difference between sheep and heap.
And not now, huh?
Now the young generation just say sheep.
Huh.
Everything, so they can't say like cheap. And that's weird, because it's like the kids have and if you ask them, I've tried this, like I tried to spell like sheep, cheap, no, I can't hear it, they say. They can't hear the difference.
Wow. That's disturbing.
So that shows you, if they don't learn things at an early age, at an adult age, when they try to learn it, it's very difficult. They have to really work at it, and they don't invest enough time to actually hear the difference at an older age. And like as a colloquial, it's interesting. Like we've gone through a process in society now that is like the Black Plague. Because the same happened during the Black Plague when we lost a part of our language. And what is that Black Plague? Well, kids grow up as orphans now. Everyone, mother and father, goes to work, so they never see their kids. So they're like raised by wolves. Like they're raised by other kids. They learn their language from other kids, which means that they are losing adult language.
So, to circle back to our subject, what do we want to introduce then as ideas or words?
That's a very good question. But let's just talk about the words the meanings that we lose. Like I've just not sort of have a setup that if we don't have words, we're put into the same basket as things. So selfishness, like the bad form of selfishness, is put into the same category as good selfishness, like being self-interested, rationally self-interested.
Yeah, there's a problem when you're trying to describe good selfishness to somebody. You have to go on for several sentences. And the same problem when you're talking to objectivists and you use greedy or bad selfishness in the bad term, they just go wild because even if you do go on for several sentences, they can. So there's this wide split in the meaning of selfishness, a very wide chasm there, and there, it's their acceptance of the ethics and the morals of altruism that gives us that. Like Peikoff said, if you change the word to gloopism, and then you go to say to somebody, I'm in favor of gloopism, they say, what does that mean? You say, well, it means being rational and taking care of yourself and preserving your own life and happiness. They say, oh, I know what you mean selfishness. They just think that it's bad.
But that means that's just like the ancient Greeks that said the sky was wine-colored. Or the ocean, I don't.
So do we need to? Well, we can't.
We need words.
We can't introduce or explain concepts to these people because they're anti-conceptual, right?
But we can. But we can give a contrast between words. So we can. So let me just posit one way of thinking of it. Like this is not just. I'm just throwing things out here. Suppose that we accepted the existing words of altruism and selfishness. And we accepted the meaning of selfishness as something bad, but we insisted that altruism was also something bad. And then we have a third term, which is the good term, which is a term that's already established, but doesn't have the same connotation, doesn't have the same negativity to it.
Now, if we let's say individualism, let's say we use
that's connected to collectivism. So I don't want to sort of like use that in this term.
Well, what I would okay. Well, what would you propose then? I mean, I would propose individualism, and then they would come back at you and they would say, well, you just mean being selfish. Then you just mean the individual out for himself.
No, like you have those are different categories. Like you have collectivism, individualism, atomism. You have the moral systems connected to altruism, then something, then something.
Right.
So
there's altruism, selfishness,
and something else. Or like today, if you're using selfishness, everyone assumes that you mean the disintegrated version.
Yeah.
So I've been like torn for many years about that. I noticed that Yaron Brook uses a very nice term. He talks about human flourishing because that is like he says that he does that on purpose to avoid the problems using the word selfish.
Well, it occurs to me that the green maniacs want human flourishing as well. They want us all to flourish in a green field of windmills and no coal power plants.
I understand that, but like what I mean is that what the word is actually, it could be gloopism, as you say. But the point is that if you have that word, you need another word to denote the bad version of it, whatever that word is. If you don't have the bad version, the people who can't see the difference between the two are not going to say it. If you say, for instance, a gloopism, I want people to be rational, take care of themselves, blah blah blah, and then say, oh, you just mean selfishness. No, selfishness is bad. Gloopism is good. Self-sacrifice is bad, and this sacrificing other for yourself is also bad. But I'm not talking about sacrificing others for yourself, selfishness, and sacrificing yourself for others. That's altruism. I want a world free of sacrifice.
And the reason you want this is because individuals will be better off and happier.
Yes.
That sounds like selfishness to me.
Yes, I understand. But if you say this,
I think we would give ourselves more credit to repatriate the word, or
that's possible.
I mean, we're going to lose credit with them. Not that they're going to give us much credit anyway. Basically, our camp is going to grow. The camp that believes selfishness is good is going to grow, and the other camp is going to shrink.
Yeah, but the problem here is still that we need, no matter how it grows, we need a third term. We need a third word. Just look at what happened with the oblectivists, because Ayn Rand didn't. She slammed statism, and she slammed anarchism, and therefore, because she had two positions, the misintegrated and the disintegrated version, to slam, it's very easy to understand that even though she talks negatively about statism, she's not an anarchist. And even though she slams the anarchists, she's not a statist. She has a third position that's her own. And no one ever thinks that she's an anarchist. And no one ever thinks that she's no one, like no serious people. You can always find people who believe anything, right? But no normal people put her into any of these two categories, because she was slamming them pretty hard. But when it came to immigration, her slamming of bad immigration, she made some remarks, but not sufficiently to make it into a word. We don't have a word for it, like anarchism. And she didn't wag her thing and say anarchism is bad. So because of that, we have now oblectivists. And because of things that she said during her lifetime, like she didn't talk about children, we have oblectivists who think that it's a sacrifice to have children. Like there's something wrong with you if you have children. Like say, it's nothing important about children. It's like if the world ends now with a lot of childless oblectivists, then that's okay. Like that's insane. That's crazy. I know that I've been hammering on that point. I'm just using this now as an example that if you don't mount a defense in one or the other direction, like towards misintegration or towards disintegration, you're going to let in a lot of people who can't see the difference. And if we don't mount a defense downward toward that bad form of selfishness and hammer that just as hard as we hammer anarchism, then you're going to attract a lot of people who actually think that form of selfishness is good.
Now, could we call it nihilism, the bad form of selfishness?
Well, no, the problem with that is that nihilism means that you're rejecting all forms of values. But a classically selfish person doesn't do that. He's just looking out for himself and is willing to step on other people to achieve his values. So he has values, but he's stepping on others to get them.
Yeah, he's just short-sighted and dishonest.
Yeah.
Well, what do we call a person who's short-sighted, dishonest, and seems to be out for their own good? Proclaims that they're out for their own good.
Yeah, motivationally, he might be out for his own good.
Well, we know businessmen who will cheat their customers and stuff, people who will sell stuff that's no good or whatever.
Yeah.
And ruin themselves in the long run.
Of course, but it's not like that they're thinking in the back of their head that I'm doing this in order to ruin myself in the long run.
So they are self-motivated, but they're just wrong about how they're going about it. They just don't understand how to actually be. They think ripping other people off is the way to be self-motivated, not producing stuff.
Yeah. Like one term that is, I know, has many connotations, and I like the term. I just recently wrote about it. It's like vampire.
Or second-handed, which is a vampire, bloodsucker. Get your vitality from someone else's vitality.
Yeah. It's like if you're saying, "Oh, you're selfish." No, what you're talking about is like vampires. I'm not a vampire. I like the term vampire because everyone immediately understands what that means. You don't have to explain anyone.
Now, we do have the term second-hand from Ayn Rand's writings.
But no one understands that.
Right.
And second-hand doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice others. You have to sacrifice your own values to be second-handed.
It occurs to me there's a big contingent in our current society that would say, I shop second-hand all the time. I hate buying new stuff.
Yeah.
They love second-hand.
Yeah, so that doesn't work. But vampires, that works.
So we want collectivism, individualism, and vampirism?
No, atomism.
Atomism.
Yeah.
Oh, where was the vampirism? It was...
altruism, egoism, and vampirism, or vampirism. And then it's very easy to say that altruism is a form of vampirism in reverse. You're allowing someone to... You're saying that it's good when a vampire sucks you dry.
I'm just putting it on the screen here. Altruism, egoism, vampirism.
Yeah.
Vampirism is sacrificing others to yourself.
Yep.
Altruism is sacrificing yourself to others.
Yep.
So
it's
that's
like vampirism in reverse.
So that's quite good. All right, now I just want to type out the next one. What was the other one?
Collectivism, individualism, and atomism.
All right, so we're proposing vampirism and atomism.
Yeah.
To clarify for the oblectivists that we don't need to go all the way over to atomism all the time. Like, you can ride a bus.
Yep.
You're not a collectivist if you ride a bus. And
even if you have like certain like shared group interests, like, well, I guess that's what a bus is.
yeah, you're all interested in getting somewhere economically together.
And and the nation state is a bus.
And there's nothing collectivist about protecting your rights and living your life while other people go about their lives living their lives. That's not collectivism, that's individualism.
Okay, so now we have sort of like some alternative terms that I'm quite happy with. They're sort of new, but they're not new. Everyone understands what an atom is. So, atomism is like you're dividing things up to like things that are not disconnected. And vampires, well, everyone knows what that is. So it's self-explanatory words, but they're at the same time new in a philosophical context.
So atomism would also help us address the objectivists who think that you can be an individual without lovers or family or friends or children.
That's right. That's atomism.
Yeah, you can't be an individual in that way because that goes against the nature of your human nature. Your nature as a human being.
Yeah, you are not born with a language so that you can sit for yourself in isolation, right?
Right. You're not born with a language, and you would never get
language organ, right?
Yeah, you would never get language without interaction.
Yeah, and even worse, like if you were born without parents, like raising you, you would never develop into a human.
And we saw terrible consequences after the Berlin Wall fell of all of the the nurseries over there in Russia full of kids that were just abandoned.
Yeah.
And the way they were raised without touch, and they turned into psychotic, violent people.
Yeah. Yeah, that crazy stuff. Yeah, very bad. So I like this. I like this usage of dim in creating these words. Now, I'd like to just think out aloud about the difference between Peikoff here, his focus, and Rand. Rand was extremely focused on creating good concepts, objective definitions. And we all are very happy about that. What Peikoff did, however, is said that, no, that's good, but we also need to make categories for bad thinking, for errors of thought. So she didn't focus much on that. I mean, she talked about it. She talked about being irrational and so forth, but she didn't actually have like a systematic approach in categorizing bad thinking in bad concepts.
Yeah. Now let's look at the two examples we've got here. She replies to altruism with egoism.
Yeah.
So
and that's fine.
It's this versus that without a third. And she
actually does, in The Virtue of Selfishness, start out by talking about this third form of selfishness, but she doesn't give it a name and she doesn't do anything with it.
Well, it's the mystics of brute and the mystics of muscle and the mystics of.
No, that's not. No, she talks about the people who are sacrificing others to themselves. I think it's in The Virtue of Selfishness. The first introduction there.
Well, that's the witch doctor. It's the witch doctor and the mystic of muscle, and those are the two versions of people who are sacrificing others to themselves. That's from the New Intellectual title essay. But she does talk about the difference between a witch doctor who fools people mentally and the brute Genghis Khan who just uses a sword.
Yeah.
And both of them are examples of collectivism, of sacrificing other people to that individual, the actor.
Yeah. So notice here that I'm not saying that Ayn Rand was not concerned with philosophical errors. She talked about altruism a lot, right? And she identified various, like, I swear by the love of my life that I will never sacrifice myself to another person, nor ask another to sacrifice himself to me. That contains that trichotomy right there. So it's not like she didn't have it in there and she didn't focus on it, but she didn't fully understand the extreme importance of, as part of your conceptual framework, you need to have error correcting codes. Like, you actually need, as part of the correct answer, to always stipulate in key wrong answers too. Like,
so she's making a duality out of these things, like egoism versus altruism.
Yeah.
When it's a trichotomy, it's altruism on one side, vampirism on the far side, and egoism is the integrated path.
And altruism is vampirism in reverse. It's the willing, the victim of the vampire, right?
Yeah. So it mirror images on either side, and then there's reality in the center.
So altruism has altruists have been glamored by the vampires.
Have been glamored.
Yeah. You're not familiar with that from vampire lore?
I don't know anything about vampires. I don't watch anything about vampires.
One common thing is that you have to invite them into your house willingly. They can't go into your house unless you invite them.
Oh, really?
Yes, and so like there are various like TV series out there where they just glamour people to say invite me in, like that, and then they invite you in the vampire into their house, and then they can eat them. So, and this captures the notion that the vampire is actually quite powerless on your home ground, right? When you are on your home ground, they can't really touch you. It really says so in the story. And you have to invite the vampire, and you have to be willing to let him eat you in order for him to be able to do that.
That's an interesting historical idea that must have been, it sounds like a grain of truth, like the snake in the garden type of thing.
Yeah.
In order to sell your soul to the devil, you have to make a deal with the devil. And in order to be eaten by the vampire, you have to invite the vampire in. In order to make a bad business deal, you have to close your ears when you're talking to this bad business guy and pretend you're not hearing the stuff which is actually going to cause your downfall.
So you're getting glamored.
You're getting glamored. You're inviting the vampire in.
Yeah.
So
I like the mythology there captures a lot of cool stuff about vampires. Like here's the one that I just recently wrote about. Is that vampires can't see themselves in the mirror. They don't have a mirror reflection. So they cannot have any form of moral self-reflection. They never see themselves. They only see the faults in others. So they never reflect on their own. Am I the baddie? That kind of thing, right? Like we talked about this, how Christianity has created an entire mental technology for looking at your own faults in the mirror, like seeing the beam in your own eye rather than the splinter in someone else's eye, and so forth. All of this. He who is without sin shall cast the first stone. That kind of thing. That's self-reflection. And vampires can't see themselves, so they lack a conscience. So they're learned sociopaths. Basically, they're progressives, right? They think they're born good, and this is one of the reasons why I'm worried about many upleftivists who say that humans are just born good. Well, if you're born good, then you don't have to self-reflect on your potential for evil, right? So humans are born on the edge between good and bad, with equal potential for both.
Yeah, Brian and I discussed this in the recent talk I had with him, and my proposal was that we are far, far potentially more evil than anything that can happen in the natural world, and obviously far, far more good, because as the Roman proverb went, what justice you find on earth will be made by man.
That's right. And the fact that you have people who believe that we're born in a specific category to the exclusion of the other, mentally that makes them think, I'm the good guy. I don't have to think about my actions. So that's a path toward vampirism.
And they have no capacity for self-reflection. And
every time every time something bad happens, they say, well, I'm the good one, so it couldn't have been my fault, so it has to be someone else. And notice how the vampire and the altruistic vampire victim fit like a hand in a glove. It's like the conservative Christian who is overly concerned with self-reflection. He always asks himself, am I the baddie? And the progressive always asks, is the conservative the baddie? So they all sort of agree that the potential bad guy here is the conservative.
Yeah, even the conservative agrees with that.
Yes, because this capacity for self-reflection needs to have another version of it, where you have the capacity to take a moral stance to say, no, I'm not the baddie, right? I need to defend myself. So self-defense is something that you need to temper this when self-reflection becomes pathological.
There was a group of Jews that were being herded by Nazis towards gas trucks. Back before they had the gas chambers, they'd put people in the back of trucks and just run the exhaust up into the bed and kill them. And some of the Jews didn't want to go, and there was arguing, and there was a rabbi there, and he said, look, brothers and sisters, we don't know why God is doing this, but it's not our our not within our authority to question these events. So let us just go with these events. And they all went and got in the trucks and were killed, and this was recorded by one of the guards who later wrote his memoirs or whatever. So there you are. There's people who, even when they were faced with the bad guys, and they themselves were the good guys, they couldn't figure out who the bad guys were. They were self-critical. There was that rabbi saying, what have we done to bring this on ourselves? We don't know, but God is doing this, so let us go along with it.
And there's actually like, apart from the absurdity in this situation, that's still a good idea and thought. Like one of the things that distinguish the Jewish sacred texts, like the Torah, from many other religious texts, is that every time something bad happens to them, they take the blame themselves. So God was angry with them because of their corruption. And you can say that, okay, maybe they were taking on too much of the blame, but most likely there was a lot of truth to that they were bringing on their downfall because of corruption, right?
Yeah.
So, for instance, I'm not going to blame that rabbi or these Jewish people who were killed completely innocently for nothing that they had ever done. But I do like the idea that the Jewish community could self-reflect on: is there something we did that fertilized the ground for people like Hitler to do these horrible things? Is there something we could have done differently? Now, this is not the same as saying that they were their own cause for their own Holocaust. I mean,
or that Hitler was in the right to do it, or anything like that. Sure.
So that's nothing like that. But it's just like saying that it's like a girl who goes outside at night and says, "I have a right not to be raped," and then she gets raped. And okay, it's true that was a wrong thing, but was it really the smartest thing you ever did to go all alone in a bad neighborhood, wearing like miniskirts at night, all alone? Was that really the smart thing to do? That kind of self-reflection means that you take precautions, and taking a precaution is not the same as taking moral blame. You're not saying that it's my fault that I got raped or something like that. You're saying, well, I am the one who has to live with the rape if it happens, so I have to take steps in order to prevent it. So I like that part of it, but like this whole idea of taking on the blame for everything, that it's just God's way, that's taking it too far. But again, then if you only have two alternatives, you can't see the third alternative. So that's why this trichotomy is so important. Like, being able to self-reflect has a negative opposite, which becomes like a narcissistic altruism, where you're looking at yourself in the mirror to the degree that you are only willing to sacrifice yourself, or you are taking the blame for the whole world. That's what I would call narcissistic altruism.
It's like they're a counterfeit coin with two sides, and then there's the real money, which is the integrated position. Because the two sides, vampirism and altruism, collectivism, atomism, they mirror each other.
Yeah, they are it's a form of anti-symmetry, like the evil twins.
Yeah.
So they're twins, but one of them is evil, or the other one is evil. So both of them are evil, but the other one is evil, right? But if you lack the third twin, the third person there that mediates between them, the third alternative, then you're just going to go back and forth between these two states of evil that are opposites. But since they're, like in mathematics, you have this notion of anti-symmetry, which is exactly this. If you negate something, you get something that is the same but opposite. So -5 is the opposite of 5. So, but they still have something in common, which is 5, the value 5. It's just that now you have a negative version of it. And of course, that's like quite some simple things in mathematics, but like it actually mirrors into philosophy. We think in dualisms all the time. And if that dualism turns out to be false, which it very often does, then we end up with false dichotomies.
That's why Peikoff's dim hypothesis is so important, because it can
super important.
It gives us this trichotomy approach to things which we had previously viewed as a dichotomy, like altruism, egoism.
Yes, and I'm really unhappy about the fact that he's put on this nice tool for us, but who's using DIM now? Very few people. It really annoys me. Because, I mean, we have very few intellectuals coming out of objectivism, and he's one of them. And his work has not been pushed in the same way that Ayn Rand's stuff has been pushed. And that's sad, because he's an improvement, a refinement of Ayn Rand. It's not like Ayn Rand didn't think of these things as clearly as Peikoff did, but it's not like she would have been in disagreement with it. Like, I mean, it's just a continuation of her work, refinement. And the fact that Ayn Rand can be refined is wonderful. But we shouldn't just talk about Ayn Rand, we should talk about Peikoff too.
Yeah, I think Peikoff's Opar is incredible. Yeah, I think he's done some great work. Maybe he fell out of favor with the Ableftivists because of his, jingoism.
Yeah, he didn't want to build a mosque in near the World Trade Center.
Yeah, and he didn't want to vote for Democrats, and he didn't want open borders.
Yeah.
So he's falling out of favor.
So he's falling into disrepute because of that. And to me, that this actually shows to me that he is a far better thinker than he has been given credit for. Like, he has some issues. Like, he was very keen on nuking Iran for a while there. I mean, you've probably seen the YouTube clip of him on Fox News.
You don't want to nuke Iran?
Well, I that's not on the top of my list of priorities.
I think we should have nuked Iran at about 12:01 p.m. on September 11th, 2001. We should have nuked them within an hour or two of those planes hitting the towers. And we should have nuked Mecca and Saudi Arabia for good measure. Fuck it, why not?
What we should have done is during the Korea War.
That's going back a bit, but okay.
No, that's where it started. We just nuked Japan, and China was taking over the East. Mao was winning on all fronts. And we were, I forget this general's name. He was ready to go in there and nuke. And he had the opinion that nuking was a tactical decision. It wasn't really up to the president.
MacArthur.
Yeah, that's probably the guy. And he wanted to go in and nuke Mao and nuke go out into the desert where they had their troops, just drop a nuke and kill 1 million of the evil communist military, right?
Right.
That would have incinerated, literally, communism. And what it would have done is would have projected the power of the West. We're not self-sacrificing. We're not meek, all of these things. And we're willing to use power when it's needed. What that would have done is that, first of all, it would have stopped the Cold War. There wouldn't have been a Cold War because, communism would have died. Or at least been a lot weaker than it was. That's number one. Number two is if America at the time had shown its willingness to use that kind of strength, cultures who are very impressed by strength and power would have bowed down. Now, what kind of cultures are very, very concerned with power? That's precisely those you find in the Middle East. And the only thing that's respected in the Middle East is power. And like in the West, we think that if we treat people nicely in those countries, then they will respect you. But they only see weakness in you and see it as an opportunity to take you down. That's the part of the culture. We have part of our culture, this turning the other cheek thing. So, and I know that this especially appeals to people of Nordic descent, like people who have been living in the winter for ages and ages and ages. They love to show how tough they are. So look at me. I go out in the winter with my without a hat on, and without a shirt. I can go out. Look, I can take the pain. And you have these in Finland. They go into the saunas. Look, I can boil myself to 100 degrees, and then afterwards I can bathe in the snow, and I just like it. And the Russians say, look, I can go skinny dipping during winter. I have to cut a hole in the ice, but I can do it because I'm a man, right? And look, I can turn the other cheek. You hit me, and I just say, dare to do that again, huh? Right? And that's a show of strength in these Nordic countries. So that's why I think that Christianity had such an appeal in Northern Europe, where they like this notion of showing strength through tolerance. How much pain they can tolerate, because that's a part of the culture here. But in the Middle East, that's just a very stupid thing to do. Everyone stabs everyone else in the back. And you can only trust your family as long as you're facing back to back.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, you can't trust your family. I mean, they rape and beat and torture each other. But
yeah, that's why I said it's only when you're in a circle facing back to back that you can trust your. And then you have this circle of trust where everyone is creating this circle around the other guys who are trying to stab them in the back. Yeah. So, and that's how the power dynamics works in the Middle East. And it's not particular to Islam or to Judaism or something like that. It's like this whole region there has been like a frying pan of military invasion and slavery and fighting for a long, long time. So that's just how things work down there. And if you go down there and say, look how strong I am by being tolerant, like all they see is a weak guy, right? So my point was that if we'd nuked Mao back then, it wouldn't have been necessary to nuke Iran.
Well, all right. But we didn't nuke Mao, so we should nuke Iran now.
Yeah, but then it was too late, right? It was because now we can't say that we nuke Iran, because now we established this form of mythology that going around nuking people is bad.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. We should have let MacArthur do China. Eisenhower fired him very quickly after that.
Yeah, but he was insubordinate. Like, he refused to meet him. Like, come back. Like, you come right here. And say, no, I'm not coming back. I have unfinished business. Like,
he thought he was a god. He had god complex.
Yeah. So that's sort of interesting. But like, he did a great job, apparently, as far as I can tell. Okay, so the point here is that Peikoff is basically the good guy. He had some issues, like anger issues, I think. Like he was coming very hard down on certain people that didn't breed a form of cooperative relations. So he had all these people that he was wagging his finger at. And I think that part of it was it was counterproductive, because you get this schism of objectivism, no true objectivist, no true Scotsman thing, where everyone was calling the other one an altruist and evasion and blah, 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 and you're getting it a smaller and smaller group. And this was in part inspired by this, you have to be a pure altruist or I will nuke you. And of course, this in part came from Ayn Rand and continued by Peikoff. That part of Peikoff I'm a little bit wary about. But his philosophy and his conclusions that he didn't want to build a mosque in the World Trade Center, thumbs up for that. Want to stop mass migration, thumbs up for that, and he wants to clearly state who the enemy is. Now, of course, Yaron Brook also does that when it comes to Islam, although lately he has been schmoozing too much with the Hollywood people.
He says Islam is less of a danger to the United States than the people in the United States are.
And that's true, because the true enemy Islam in itself has no power. Islam is only powerful when you make yourself weak. Now, of course, you can say that. I would compare. I've done this comparison before. Islam is like the flu or a mild cough, and progressivism is like AIDS. So if you allow progressivism to take over and ruin your immune system, your moral and political immune system, then even a bug, a flu, a common flu can kill you, like Islam, right? So I think that Yaron Brook is absolutely correct that Islam in itself is not dangerous. What have they ever created? What has Islam ever created? They can't create pencil sharpeners without the West.
Yeah, this goes to my point that I say every enemy we've ever had, we equipped.
Yep.
Every single one.
So we need to stop equipping them.
That's not going to happen.
No, what I mean is we're morally equipping them, right? Islam is a religion of peace.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to keep on equipping them.
No, but what I mean, there's a difference between actually giving weapons to certain Muslim groups to fight, to do some infighting in the Middle East, and sanctioning, for instance, what we did with Saudi Arabia, like saying, you get to keep the steel. We'll get steel from you, and you'll get religion from us.
Oil.
That
steel? Oh, we sent them steel. Okay.
And we'll give them religion in return. They give religion in turn. So they said that we don't care about that you can sell things to us, but religion is off base. And in the West, where they were materialists and religion is not important, they said, okay, that's fine. And completely undermining the fact that religion is proto-philosophy, right? And philosophy rules people's lives. It's really important. And you can't just dismiss it. And allowing Saudi Arabia to take over the oil fields that were developed by Americans, and then allowing them to make money to then spread their poison into the world, now that's evil, right? That's sanction of the victim.
Yeah,
right?
That's where it all went wrong, when we allowed them to take over the oil fields. Absolutely.
So that's insane, and that's self-sacrifice, and it's pointless, and it's absolutely insane. So the problem is that you can't fix it with a nuke now, because the problem is with us.
Well, I want to try.
Yeah, but what happens is that you have to have the moral strength to do it, and if you have the moral strength to do it, you probably don't need to do it. You see, they're not a strong enemy.
I don't like now. How do you apply that to Japan? We got so much moral strength, we don't need to nuke them.
No, what I mean is, we did use it in Japan. It was an actual war, and no one questioned it at the time. It was an unjustified action, and we were ready to start nuking other places too. But then there was some soft idiots that said, "Oh no, can't do that." But that if the leaders at the time had the moral strength to say that in war, this is what we do. When we have people to lose in war, this is how we fight. Then there would have been not many more wars. I mean, there were a lot of proxy wars. And the reason there were proxy wars is because we had evil communists inside America that were doing their best to aid the enemy. And we still have them.
Yeah.
And the problem here is we are not just one guillotining away from creating utopia on Earth, because these were born in America, these enemies, and they will always be born in America because there will always be a snake in the garden, right? We can't wall out all, like, in this, literally building a wall is not going to help, because what good does it do to keep bad socialists out if the socialists are actually literally born here, and people will flock to evil ideas because they are attracted to them and they want to destroy America from within. So the fight ultimately has to come within. We have to have this ongoing fight against the evil people among ourselves who are trying to destroy America from within. And if we're able to muster that strength to save America from those people, then all the other things are peanuts in comparison. The real enemy is here, right here in America, or here, I'm not in America, but in the West, inside. And it's not the immigrants, it's not brown people, it's white people with a blackened heart, right? They are communists to the core.
Yeah, I'm sure you're familiar with my identification of German philosophy being at the heart of modern Islam.
Yeah, I see what you mean there, yeah. Because many of the people who are leaders within Islam were educated in the West.
Almost all of them. I mean, virtually every single one. And that even holds true for communists in the Far East. Pol Pot was educated in France. Everybody from the Far East was educated by the West. They're all Karl Marx's philosophy. It's all Karl Marx.
Yeah. So obviously, we have Houston. We have a problem, right? And it's within our own territories. So I'm sort of on board with Yaron Brook saying that Islam in itself is not really the main bad guy here, and it's not really in itself. It's not a problem. We need to save the West.
Well, I mean, I identify Marxism as the problem, and Islam is practicing Marxism, and in that sense, that's very dangerous. Islam itself, whatever, but Marxism clearly is very dangerous.
Yeah, it is, but at the same time, I've been thinking about that. I've been thinking about how Ayn Rand called Kant the most evil man ever to live, and then Karl Marx as a very good number two, right? But the problem is, like, their ideas just immediately caught on. And the same with Rousseau. What's up with that? Like, how can someone be? How can it be evil that other people are attracted to some ideas? I mean, do we give the credit to Rousseau and to Kant and to Hume for their ideas immediately catching on? No, we don't. They caught on because there was something in the culture at that time that made this appeal to them. So what was it in the culture? Well, in Germany, in Prussia, you had this duty culture. And it was part of the Germanic tribes that you had a duty to your tribe, right? And this was very strong in the parts of, especially in the Germanic tribes. And when Kant came along and raised duty to the utmost moral standard, he was hitting a lot of nerves. A lot of people felt attracted to that because it was already present in the culture. The same with Karl Marx. He was playing on resentment. He was just lighting the fire with a match, but the grass was dry. You had a lot of resentful, hateful people who needed to just structure their hate in a way that made them feel good. So I saw a debate recently between Yaron Brook and a socialist. It's on, Yaron recently posted it on his YouTube. It's actually quite good to watch. And he's responded a little bit to that afterwards. But I felt that he didn't do a good job in that. Like, well, let me rephrase that. He did a perfectly standard job. Like, normally you couldn't expect anyone to do anything better. But he just didn't go to the heart of the problem. what this socialist guy, and you really should see his opening statement. He says, socialism is not a particular political system. It's not a solution. It's a dream. And like, when I heard that, I said, wow, how incredibly honest of you to say that, on the other hand. And also, thank you for putting your head on the block, because that's the easiest thing to chop down. Now, of course, Yaron Brook never chopped him down because he didn't know how to respond to that, because that's normally people don't say crazy stuff like that.
That could have been said by Yaron Brook.
No, I don't agree with that.
Socialism is a dream that can never come true. It's just
no. But no. So Yaron Brook would say that socialism is statism, but he said no. It's not necessarily statism. Like it's a dream, and it doesn't have any solution. There's no solution, but it's a dream.
Oh, okay. And you want to say, well, it's statism.
No, I don't want to say that. I say that, yes, you're absolutely right, that socialism is not a solution. It's not a particular political system. It's a dream. But who has that dream? What kind of a dream is it? It's not ordinary people who have that dream. It's a certain group of people who are very talented, but among the talented, they are at the bottom of the talent stack. So among the cognitive elite, they are the losers. So they're just talented enough to be ambitious, but they are not good enough to put those ambitions into fruition. So they always go around living feeling that things are not good enough. So they have a dream of something better, and they turn that resentment into action in the form of socialism.
They get together in groups, and they demand stuff in groups.
And notice that these are the same people who would say that the working class in America abandoned the socialist cause because they were no longer poor.
Yeah, now that's why Marxism was popular in Europe, not because there was capitalism in Europe, but because there's poverty in Europe. There wasn't capitalism. If there were capitalism in Europe, there wouldn't have been poverty.
But Marxism was only popular for like 10 years or so, and then people's payrolls started to rise due to capitalism. And because of that, people just abandoned Marxism in Europe, but not in Russia and in China, the still places that were still not developed. But everywhere else, the working class became the middle class, and the middle class is the capitalist class, right?
Yeah.
So everyone was supporting capitalism because that's what capitalism does. It creates the middle class. And that's exactly now in America why the left hates the middle class and wants to destroy middle America. They want to destroy middle America and the middle class because they are the product of capitalism. And they don't want to help people. They want a project where they can be the hero. And so they want to have some kind of utopian goal, and they don't care what that utopian goal, as long as they get to be the heroes. They get to be the leaders. So they're not good enough to do things voluntarily, so they have to do things by force. That's why they resort to statism. So statism is not the fundamental part of the socialist dream. Statism is the consequence of incompetence. Their ambitions are higher than their competence level. And the only way they can bridge that competence gap is by force. They have to force people to do things that they don't want. So statism comes as an outgrowth of that hubris, that over-ambition, over-evaluation of their own abilities and their own right to change the world. So these are little god kings in their head.
It seems they think they can bend reality or break reality or ignore reality if they get enough people together in a big enough group.
Yes, but the most important thing here is that's what they believe. But what I just did now, I did it at what could be called an ad hominem attack. I would not, in that situation, have attacked socialism. I would have said, no, it's not the dream that's the problem. It's the dreamers. Those people who have that dream are sick in the head. There's something awfully wrong with them. Because he was saying that capitalism is bad because it's let down all the people of the world and blah, blah, blah. That's such an ungrateful thing to say. There are literally like 7 billion people on the planet alive thanks to capitalism. And people have been uplifted to an enormous living standard. And all he can do is whine. And the reason he can only whine is because he's big inside the head, but not as big as his capacity of his competence. And that's something sick. So I want to focus on the dreamers, not on the dream.
The nightmare havers. It's not a dream, it's a nightmare.
No, for us it will be a living nightmare, but for them it is a dream. And it is not a nightmare for them.
It's a dream until they wake up in the reality of what they've created and they're a prisoner in one of their gulags.
No. It continues. Those are the true dreamers. They just surf the wave all the way in.
Solzhenitsyn met these people in the gulag, and he said they were the lowest of the low. They were looked down on by everybody. Communists who still couldn't give up a belief in communism, even though they were in the gulag, and they were still left-tards, libtards. In the gulag, they were the lowest of the low.
But those are not the dreamers, right? The dreamers are the Stalin type.
Yeah.
So Peter Thiel pointed out that his professor said that the support for communism started waning. I think it was in 1954 when Stalin died, and it started waning because that's when the killing stopped.
Yeah.
So they were not communists despite of the killings, but because of it.
Yeah.
They're hateful monsters, and they want to destroy and take revenge on the world, like a modern Cain and Abel figures. They're the modern Cain that want to have revenge on reality because they're not as good as Abel.
Yeah, they just want to kill one more person or one more group of people, and then we'll have a good world once we kill this last group of people. Always one more group.
We're only one more execution away from utopia, right?
Exactly.
And the thing is, what they don't understand or feel that whenever they get a rush from killing people, like the Antifa people, when they go out there, they're not fighting for justice. They just want to smash someone's face, right? That's what they get the rush from.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is that the problem is not the ideology, because if you don't have sick puppies, socialism has nothing to work with. You need to have morally depraved people who want to murder and want to force other people to listen and obey. Only those people can actually animate socialism, because socialism in itself is rather mundane when it's left to ordinary people who are not sick in the head. So I think that the focus should not be on the ideology, but on the psychology of those who are attracted to that kind of sick ideology.
All right. Well, we have to draw a line here. We should talk next time the psychology of altruism then.
Yeah. Right. That's great.
All right. That'll be our next thing, because that's a hot topic we should do. So.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Onar. I have to run now.
All right.
We'll speak soon. All righty.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me. Please go to patreon.com/Mr. Cropper and contribute if you want me to continue doing videos and spend more time doing things.